how long a yes will last. Yeah. We don't know what the next yes is, but like you were saying, Aaron, it's that continuing discernment and obedience to the next yes, and trusting that even if it feels like we're letting go of something good that we're doing for the kingdom, that it won't be good if it's not what God is asking us to do. Do you find yourself wondering if this is all marriage has to offer? Are you so busy and exhausted at the end of the day that your marriage is the last thing you have energy to think about?
If you're wondering if God has more for your marriage, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Living Marriages Podcast. My name is Aaron, pastor and marriage coach.
And I'm April, spiritual director and marriage coach. Join us as we explore simple habits for building intimacy with your spouse while learning what it means to center your marriage on Christ. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Living Marriages Podcast. We just thank you again so much for being here, for being our listeners, for downloading our episodes every week. If we didn't have you listening, there would be no point other than the fact that we're being obedient to God and doing this.
And we're enjoying it.
Yes,
and it's good for our own marriage.
That's true. But we thank you so much for listening. And we encourage you, if this podcast has impacted your life in a positive way, to share it with a friend, to leave us a review on whatever service you're listening on, and please get in touch with us if you have a story to share. We would love to hear how God has impacted you and your marriage through this podcast. Well, today we are excited to kind of continue on a bit of a series that we've been doing recently. And so if you go back to episodes 65 and 67 and their corresponding Thursday thoughts, we've been talking about, so we started with talking about who we believe God is, and if we believe if he is who he says he is in his word. And then the next episode 67, is if we believe God is who he says he is, then who does he say we are? And what do we believe about that? What lies do we believe about ourselves that God wants to speak his truth into? And we're continuing on with that today, where if we believe God is who he says he is, and that we are who he says we are, then how do we live? How does that inform the decisions that we make in our lives? How does that give us our why for the choices that we make and the life that we live?
Such an important question, especially if you're in a season in your life where you've just got a lot of decisions to make. We have been through that journey, and we are still on that journey, joining the team over at Family Life Canada. And we, I think, are where we are at because we had a really good friend really invite us to ask this question: what's your why? If you believe God is who he says he is, if you believe the truth about who God says you are, then you're going to start to journey with him and ask God, what's the why for my life then? Our friend is Reverend Dr. John Littlejohn. That made him sound really fancy. And he is an incredible guy.
I could just hear him laughing at when you said that.
Yeah, the Reverend Dr. Littlejohn. He's been a guest on this podcast before, and we look forward to having him back again soon. But we were out visiting him in Vancouver, and he just felt like the Holy Spirit was asking him to ask us the question, why? This was during a time where we had a lot of things to discern. Should we follow through with this invitation to join Family Life Canada? Are there other opportunities that we could take on as a family and as a couple? And John, in the wisdom and the strength of the Spirit, asked us, so you've got all these decisions to make, but what's your why? Why are you? What is God's purpose for your life? And we talked, and he was very discerning with us, and he kept saying to us, no, that's your how. This is how you think you're going to carry out God's thing, whether it's through this choice you make or that choice you make. Those are your hows. But he's like, I still haven't heard your why. And it was a very challenging conversation, and one I'm so grateful for that we had some time following our conversation, about a week or so, where we just could spend time daily with the Lord, asking him, God, what's my why? Why have you made me to be the way I am and to be who I am? And I'll just share my own personal reflection, my own personal story, and it kind of was summarized. You'll have heard me reference sermons of Darrell Johnson quite a bit recently, as they've been very helpful and informative for me. And Darrell Johnson, in one of his sermons on discipleship, talked about a pastor from a church in Hollywood, I believe, who summed it up this way. He said, we're here to just help people say yes to Jesus. We so often focus on having good doctrine and good practice. Doctrine matters. I'm not saying doctrine doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, we can get stuck behind doctrine, and we can never move into actually saying yes to Jesus. Jesus, you want me to go this way? Yes. Jesus, you want me to do this with the resources you've given me? Yes. Jesus, you want me to go talk to that person and share the good news of who you are with them? Yes. All of these things. And it felt like, for me, God was bringing clarity around my why is to say yes to Jesus and to help others do the same. And I believe that's what we're called to at the Living Marriages podcast as well. Help our marriages, help our families say yes to Jesus.
Mm-hmm. As you're saying that, I was just reminded, we've talked about this before. It might sound a little daunting to think about actually knowing, well, what is Jesus asking me to say yes to? Mm-hmm. And how do I know that? And one thing I'd just encourage you to consider is that God doesn't ask us to slay a giant.
No.
Right off the bat. With David, before he faced Goliath, God gave him so many small things to be obedient in and to learn what his why was, what God was asking of him, and to be able to learn to trust God before he walked onto that battlefield. He knew from his experience with God and saying yes to God that he could trust that God would be with him in facing Goliath.
Right, because he had faced the bear, he had faced the lion, and God was with him, and he slayed those to protect the flock under his care. So beautiful, beautiful story. Another example of knowing our why and being able to discern our why and really listening to God, to his Spirit, and doing so as a couple together in unity. Why this is so important kind of came out of the story of Bob and Linda Loddick. We had them on for episode 59 and 61, where they just gave such beautiful wisdom, especially in the area of finances. And we talked in our conversation episode 59 with them how Bob had felt led by God's Spirit to give a percentage of their income equal to their age. So they were 31 at the time. That meant they were going to boost their giving from 11% of their income to 31% of their income. And how God completely honored that and was so faithful. And it was such a beautiful story. Well, very recently, after we had them come on the podcast, we heard them on their own podcast, Seed Time. And we'll put a link to this episode specifically there, where they felt God calling them away from that giving practice now. And it was so interesting listening to their discernment process around that, because they thought, God, this is a great thing you've given us, and this you have blessed us, you have seen us through this, and they're getting older, so they're giving more of their income away. But it felt like to both of them, God was saying that season is done now. And it's such a fascinating conversation. Again, please go check out the show notes. We'll have the link there. We're big Bob and Linda fans. And one thing that stood out from their conversation was how they had been obedient. They had said yes to God at that season in their life when they were 31, and that's exactly what God had for them. But now in this new season they were being called into with God, he had something different for them. And they had to be obedient to that and to listen to that and say yes to God in a new way in this new season. And one of that, I don't remember if it was Bob or Linda, said, the danger is that you can make an idol out of a past yes to God. I can take my obedience and make something idolatrous out of that, because saying, look at how obedient we are being to God. Let's build monuments around this. Let's make something huge out of this. And in Bob and Linda's case, they said, we became known as those people who gave a percentage of their income as their age. Like that became part of their identity. And it was really a wrestle with God to actually give that up, because they said, well, then what will we be known for if we don't do this anymore? And God's saying, trust me, you are now in a new season. I have a new assignment for you. Will you say yes to that?
And when they first heard that from God, that was his best for them in that season. That was what they needed to do to be able to grow and to trust him. Because they were trying to pay off their house, their mortgage at the time. And they had it all planned out, but God wanted them to trust him. And that was that season. And if we get stuck in that season of what was the best then if we're continuing to say yes to that from the past, we are saying no to something in the present that God might be asking of us to grow us in a different way. Or maybe a new yes is his way of us ministering to those around us. We don't know how long a yes will last. Yeah. We don't know what the next yes is. But like you were saying, Aaron, it's that continuing discernment and obedience to the next yes, and trusting that even if it feels like we're letting go of something good that we're doing for the kingdom, that it won't be good if it's not what God is asking us to do.
I can't help but think about the story of how God provided for Israel in the desert with manna. And he asked them to trust him for fresh manna daily. And I think as humans, we like to say, oh man, that yesterday's manna was really good. And we all know that if we know the story, we know that any manna that was kept overnight went rotten because God had fresh manna for them daily. And maybe today's manna has, I don't know, raisins in it or something.
Our son wouldn't enjoy that.
But we have to be open to that. This is today's manna for you. This is the new season I am with you. And it means that we can't just rely on having heard God yesterday and saying, oh, okay, therefore, God, that's your word to me, and it's just going to be like that for the rest of our lives. No, God's invited us into relationship with him, and we get to hear him daily. And our prayer is for us to be able to hear God together daily, and to be able to enter into discernment daily, saying yes to him as a married couple. So we'll have space on our Thursday Thought, which will be episode 72, for us to dive into some of the area of discernment around this. But we wanted to, again, stoke the conversation, get you and your spouse thinking, what's our why? What's our why in life? What's God's why for us? And how is that informing what we say yes and no to in our lives? Do we have anything else?
I don't know. I thought you were ending there. I don't think so. I can't think of anything. So we send you off from listening today, and just pray God's blessing on your conversations, on your considerations of what God may be calling you to, and maybe what God might be asking you to let go of. Until Thursday. Thank you for the privilege of journeying with you today as we seek God's best for our marriages.
Before you go, if you've been blessed, challenged, or inspired by what you've heard today, please bless us by hitting the follow button, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and sharing this podcast with family and friends.
You can also support this nonprofit podcast by making a charitable donation at our website, livingmarriages.com.
Until next time, praying the life, intimacy, and connection of God's love over you and your marriage.